Hi, I'm Nitesh Shah, and I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Tennessee. Today, I'll be presenting two research where we quantified the impacts of shared e-scooters on transit ridership. This presentation has two parts. The first would be to quantify the ridership of transit and shared e-scooters. And the second part would be to use data from transit and shared e-scooters to identify the location of scooter corrals, which is a parking location. Before I begin my presentation, I want to acknowledge the contribution of Abu Bakr Jidan, who basically led this project, even and also supervision of Dr. Prekud and Dr. Cherry. The first part of the presentation is understanding the effects of shared e-scooters on bus ridership in Nashville. And this paper is published in Transportation Research, Part D. With the introduction of shared e-scooters in the United States, within the first few years, there were millions of trips. But we don't actually know the impacts of shared e-scooters on transit. Basically, shared e-scooters can impact transits in three ways. First, it can complement transit, which means that it can serve as the first and last mile to transit trips. It can also compete with transit, which means shared e-scooters can replace transit trips. And the third possibility is that there is no impact of shared e-scooters on transit, which means that shared e-scooters are being used for different purpose than using transit. And one example is recreational trips, which could be riding around a park. The prior findings in shared e-scooters impact on transit has showed mixed results. And in this paper, we quantified the impacts of shared e-scooters on bus ridership based on trip purpose. There were we identified 5 trip purpose in Nashville based on principal component analysis and k-means clustering. The study location is in Nashville, and the study duration is from March 2016 to July 2019. And the study is done in Nashville because it has great data on both scooters and transit. We used fixed effect regression to identify the impacts. We found that some trip purpose has positive impacts on transit ridership, whereas other has negative. For example, utilitarian trips, which are somewhat longer e-scooter trips and has direct path between origin and destination, has negative impacts on bus ridership. This could mean that utilitarian trips has somewhat competing effect with transit ridership. On the other hand, social trips, which generally occurs in the evening with origin and destination around locations of restaurants, has positive impact with bus ridership. And as a net impact, we found that the net impact of shared e-scooters on transit is negative, but very small. So in conclusion, we found that the net impact of shared e-scooters on transit ridership is very small but significant. But we also found that some trip purpose has a complementary effect on transit ridership. And with that, we have a certain policy recommendation for transit agencies. First, transit agencies can use integration of shared e-scooters and transit ridership to promote the integrated use of both of these modes. For example, for social trips, transit agencies and other transportation agencies can offer discounted coupons so that people find it easier to use both e-scooters and transit. Policies like don't drink and ride can help promote use of transit ridership. Next, there is a possibility of better integration of trip planning and fare payment system, which is basically the concept of MAS. And with better trip planning and payment, people might use both e-scooters and transit for a trip. And next, there could be better distribution of shared e-scooters around transit, which leads to the second project we did, which was to identify the location of e-scooter corral using both e-scooter and transit data. This study is published as a compendium of TRB, and we also did present in the last TRB meeting. So with shared e-scooters deployment, there are issues of deployment and parking of shared e-scooters, which has led to issues of cluttering of sidewalk. And from our previous study, we found that shared e-scooters could have positive impact on transit. So in this study, we combined both transit and scooter data to identify the location of e-scooter corrals near bus stations, which could encourage the use of both shared e-scooters and transit. Similar to the previous study, this study location is in Nashville. So in this study, we have 4 steps. The first step is to identify the trips that complements transit, which is from our previous paper, and we found that social trips complements transit. The second step is to assign shared e-scooter trip origin and destination to bus stop, and we used GIS and spatial join to do this task. The third step is to rank bus stop based on multi-criteria scoring system, which we used as the number of trips starting and ending at bus stop, and also number of bus stops, number of transit routes serving in each bus stop, as well as frequency. And the first step was to propose the capacity of scooter corral for parking, and we used 85 percentile hourly e-scooter origin and destination at each stop. At the end, we identified 50 potential locations near bus stops that would be suitable for scooter corral parking. And the chart in the right hand shows the location of those corrals. We also identified the capacity by identifying small and large corral location. And all these 50 locations can potentially capture 44% of total e-scooter demands. We shared the location of the scooter corrals with the local stakeholders, mainly Nashville Department of Transportation and Tennessee Department of Transportation. And with this location, they can actually go to the site, evaluate the potential installment of scooter corral. With that, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.